Alright, time for me to rant about pet peeve, and I do have the time, so I'm waiting for Dead by Daylight's 2v8 mode. I am not joking, this video shall be recorded in the time it takes to get to a freaking match. But anyway, the main point I'll get into is freaking broken or busted PC ports of games. Specifically, not just the fact that that's a case for putting in games, it's more the fact that I know if this were on the console version of the same problem, heads would be rolling. Let me explain what I mean. So in a recent video I made about video game difficulties, I brought up and recorded footage of Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition to highlight Legendary Dark Knight mode and everything. But when I first booted up the game, this happened. And I was confused on why that was happening, especially since I have an entire playthrough on the channel just playing as Virgil, even no damaging the final boss of Ultimate Die mode. So I was confused on why the game suddenly would just close itself outright after booting up. And apparently there's been issues since 2017 with apparently several Capcom games, so some say it also applies to Resident Evil Revelations, although for me that game still works. Well, I could have been doing my Cry 4 edition that still worked. Screw the Revelations. But that pretty much highlights the entire problem that if this happened to the console version where it would crash the moment it boots up, heads would be rolling by now. Which then leads to the next thing, which is you're probably wondering, wait, if the game literally won't even launch, how'd you record that footage? The answer? I had to use a fan solution in order to get it to run, where someone managed to pretty much provide a different executable file in order for it to run. And it's still not a perfect solution, because on the footage, you see entirely full screen, except for the mouse that's there, sorry. But the reason the mouse is there is because what y'all saw was it recorded entirely at full screen. Here is what I see trying to record the footage. And you see the problem here. And you may think, well, the game's running, rather go to PC settings. Well, if I do go to PC settings, the game crashes. Which is a completely unacceptable state for a game, especially one that was running years ago and I bought years ago, but now it doesn't work. And just the fact that I know this happened to a console title, where if, especially a game that came out years ago, just suddenly no longer function, people would be incredibly pissed and demanding freaking answers and solutions to this. But on PC, many cases like this will generally just have the developers basically have you kick rocks. Another one that really pissed me off to hell and back was one that happened for Yakuza Like a Dragon / Yakuza 7, depending on which name I go with. But I had a special unique glitch where for some reason the game would keep reverting back my save file to a previous one. It was always the same save file that was always at chapter 4 my character's at level 13. Every single time I reboot the game, it would go there. And they never fixed this ever. I managed to deduce that they're probably something to do with the fact that I was family sharing the game with my brother, because it would also happen to him where it would revert his save file to an earlier point, and I basically had to keep making copies of the new save file before closing the game, so that way it wouldn't get reverted. And this issue never got fixed. This is the reason why I decided to pretty much never play Yakuza on PC, because Like a Dragon just had this freaking ungodly bug that never got patched out. And if there was a bug on the console version that would just delete your save file repeatedly, people would flip, because that pretty much made the game unplayable. Like, it's stuff like this where it's just like, for some reason, companies just decide they don't gotta fix the official PC. Now, there are some cases where some issues, especially for older games, could be due to the fact that newer operating systems may mess with the game, so that's not on the developer per se, that's on the operating system maker, in this case Microsoft with Windows, so that'd be on them. But, counterpoint, these companies still sell these games. These games are still being sold regardless at the price that they have. So it's still up to the publisher's responsibility to make sure the game effing works. And I know for many people, especially on PC, they would just suggest, why not use the Steam refund policy and all that. But the two games I mentioned were games that I've played years ago. The Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition worked when it first came out. It does not work now. There ain't no way to get a refund for that game whatsoever because it has long since passed the 2-hour mark, and not only that, it's been literal years, so it would also be impossible. So, no, that wouldn't be a solution at all. And I hate this whole entire fact that a PC game could just become broken way later. And it's generally, sometimes it happens with console compatibility where its compatibility may not be ideal and have its own issues, but I never seen one to the point where the game was just completely broken. Actually, wait, no, I think Senator Conroe on PS5 freaking may have issues with becoming unplayable, which is an outlier, but also a freaking problem as well. Not sure that's fully a thing. I'm not sure. I'm just going based on my memory for that one. But it just freaking sucks when a game you bought just no longer works. It just doesn't. And those are only the issues I can pretty much talk about right now with some games that I own. There are also other games that also have freaking issues, like how remember how Persona 5 Strikers, when it was new on PC, it probably still has it now, there was a bug for certain people where the game was soft locked after like the game's 5th arc. Like for some reason the game would just cut to black, it would just never transition to the next cutscene, leaving the game completely unplayable. It was just completely stuck there, and they couldn't beat it, and I don't think it ever got patched out. Luckily, I didn't get hit by that, but it's one of those things where, once again, if the console version had a bug where it could just not progress to the next cutscene and just pretty much be stuck forever unplayable, heads would freaking roll, because freaking if a console version has issues, suddenly companies will go completely nuts to try to fix all the problems entirely. But if it's a PC thing, some reason companies will just, they'll just move on, just let it be. I say companies because obviously the PC players, they're pissed. They will forever be pissed in the situation. But the companies will just pretty much be like, not our problem. To a lesser degree when I'm on this topic, there's also the fact that many games, even on PC, will also just not rebrand their controls for the PC platform. Like, the base PC control scheme is mouse and keyboard. Yeah, you will have so many games that either will just have the mouse basically try to pretend like it's an analog stick, which is what happened in the case of like Binary Domain, where the menus feel awkward because rather than giving you a pointer, you're just trying to pretend like your mouse is an analog stick, and it just feels incredibly weird despite the fact that when it comes to combat, it feels very good and fine, but aspects like that. Or how some games will immediately upfront tell you to use a gamepad. Even the Yakuza games will upfront tell you, real Yakuza, use a gamepad. It was one of those things like, okay, I get it. The game is best meant for a controller, but the audacity to just be like, hey, that default control scheme you got, hey, don't use it. That's the case for a lot of games. Once again, no way in hell would a company make a game on a console that would tell them immediately, put a mouse and keyboard, bitch. Like, no one would ever have the audacity to make it work with a controller, no matter how awkward it may be with remapping, but they'll get it done, because they don't expect freaking console players to have other peripherals like that, which, to be fair, you really shouldn't expect people to have other peripherals by default. But when it comes to PC, it's more of an expected that you have a controller, a functioning one at least, and sometimes you need certain controllers, because sometimes certain controllers may not work right off the bat. Like, the default PC controller you're meant to have is pretty much the Xbox controller nowadays, where games generally default to an Xbox control scheme when the controller is plugged in, even if the controller is for a different company entirely. So that's been the default, though back in the day they expected to have the controllers that just had random numbers on each button, despite clearly trying to mimic a DualShock controller. I hate those things with burning passion. But there are some older games that will default to that kind of method, something like also Final Fantasy VII, the OG Final Fantasy VII on Steam, and the Steam port is based off the original 1998 PC version of Final Fantasy VII. The problem with this game, or this version specifically, is that it basically doesn't show any sort of key bindings in the slightest. It'll just tell you to push the button it tells you to push, but not exactly the button according to an actual control scheme. Ready? Do not military standoff. Begin. Oh,
Oh,
you.
Jesus.
Game. I ain't doing any of that.
Holy fuck.
I'll try to shove his gun up your butt. How about that? It's just telling you push this function in order to progress, but you have no idea what that is because that can pretty much be anything. And I hate that whole entire fact when it comes to older freaking PC games where they'll just do that. They'll just be like, push whatever function here. It's kind of like how people hate it when freaking console games have characters say, press this button or press action button. I'm going to tell you what button it is because the voiceover was made to be non-specific depending on which version of the game you're playing. And that's how it feels a lot when it comes to older PC games where they'll just be like, you figure it out. Then there'll just sometimes be PC versions that just won't come with all the content. Like Alice Madness Returns specifically does not have the DLC costumes from the console versions, and they never went up for purchase and are completely unavailable. But like with Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition, fans have pretty much made mods to activate and return those costumes, except now on PC thanks to the power to do modding, because you can't get them anywhere else. Those costumes are actually free to get, as opposed to console where they cost money, but since the company would put them up for sale on PC, that is their loss. Another game I'll bring up is a game that recently reached a sales milestone, and that's the game Killer is Dead. I believe recently sold 1 million copies, which is very impressive since that game only ever got released on PS3 360 and a terrible PC port. Terrible because there was a bug early in the game which will prevent you from progressing. The game would just never open the next door after a certain conversation, making the game completely unplayable. Fortunately, once again, I didn't get this bug. I knew about the bug when I played the game, but unfortunately I was lucky enough to not get it. Instead, you have another bug that, okay, technically this is the player's fault, but you can make the game run at 60 FPS. But the game is clearly not built for it, because they need to adjust the files for QTEs to pretty much go with the increased frame rate. Otherwise, they'll go by so fast you won't be able to do anything to them. So that's more on the player. But there is one of the Gigolo modes freaking events that if you freaking don't turn off 60 FPS, it will make the game crash. Once again, that's more on the player, because modifying the game past the point that developers actually intended, you know. So that one is more the player, but that progress bug that makes you can't beat the game, that is not the players, that's on the developers who had no PC port, and the fact that it's released in that state and never got fixed. Freaking, that's freaking awful. Now for the main point of my rant, which is more the fact that none of these things would fly on console if both of this happened. Before someone says, what about Sonic the Hedgehog 2006 that is full of bugs? Yes, it is a very buggy unfinished game. But the bugs don't prevent you from beating the game. They'll inconvenience you at best, but you can still beat the game, as shown many people who have completed those games. The bug I had for Yakuza required me to do a workaround that if I didn't do, I would just never be able to actually finish the game. That is a main difference. And the main point is, of course, two major cases of broken ports. That being Batman Arkham Knight and Cyberpunk 2077, where Batman Arkham Knight on PC was so terribly broken that basically WB actually took the game down in order to fix it, which is something that is so rare for a PC port to have, where actually take the game down from sales in order to fix it. And now, from what I've seen, the PC port is fine and good. It works. You can beat the game. That's fine and dandy. From what I looked up, the game got broken again in 2023, but then fixed again. This game's a constant cycle, apparently. But let's just suppose that to see Projekt Red with Cyberpunk 2077, where that game, okay, none of the versions actually launched well at all, but the PC version was the most stable of them. It was playable. At least you could finish the game. The console versions had several issues. More so, I believe the PS4 version had many issues that basically made the game unplayable. And what was Puzzle's response? Of course, to get justified angry. Yes, good, justifiably mad. But it was to the point where the game actually got delisted from consoles, only relisted later once the game was in a working condition, and they were actually getting sued over it. I think they were getting sued more from stockholders, I believe, rather than sued for making a bad console port. But it just highlights the fact that heads were effing rolling because the console version of freaking Cyberpunk 2077 did not work. Or at least did not work well, because I see people who played it on the PS5 with compatibility and managed to have better results. But the fact that the PS4 and Xbox One versions did not work was a complete awful travesty that is something that should not be allowed at all for any version. But it highlights that console versions got this one bad port, and that was enough for people to suddenly have mass protests and did try to petition CD Projekt Red for making a broken game. But again, that's where on PC, they would have just been told to go kick rocks by some companies. Actually, not some. A lot of companies told to just go kick rocks. I'll also throw in how The Last of Us Part 1 on PC also released in a buggy and broken state. And that was from effing Sony and Naughty Dog. That's one of their biggest titles. And not even they could do that. Like I said, they fixed it later. But the fact that they launched it in a broken state is effing ridiculous and nuts. Especially from freaking a Sony-backed studio. Once again, more heads would be rolling if, like, it actually released on now PS5, it was completely busted. Heads would be rolling. So that's just what I wanted to vent about. The fact that, for some reason, companies feel it's just acceptable just have either a game-breaking bug or a completely broken version of their games on PC. But if it were a console, they'd have to try and start fixing that thing ASAP, lest the freaking console fan base justifiably eat them alive. But many games can just launch broken. I mean, even a console, games can launch broken, but they won't stay broken forever on console due to the fact that console fans eat them alive. But if it's a PC fan having an issue, they might fix it, they might not. They might try to kick rocks. They might take a perfectly working version of a game and then break it and do nothing. I remember Resident Evil 5 on PC was getting re-released, have all the DLC. Not included, just specifically ported to PC. Not included, because I got paid for it. But they took away the games for those live, and when they initially did that, the game was broken and didn't work. Nowadays, it works except for the 60 FPS bug with one boss, but that's a universal issue 60 FPS, so that's not PC exclusive problem. But when that game first got rebrought on Steam, it was broken and completely unplayable, and people initially, including me, had no hope to actually fix it, and the money they spent was pretty much just went down the drain. So that's my biggest pet peeve when it comes to freaking PC version games, the fact that companies will just be like, eh. And the fact that now Devil May Cry 4 Special Edition can run for some people, for people like me, it just won't run on a fan patch. Even a fan patch is exactly an ideal solution, and I shouldn't need a fan patch in order for the game to properly run. That's all I wanted to say. Go out there, play games, hopefully games that work. Hopefully play games that actually work. Good day.